If someone had told me a year ago that my fairy tale marriage was just a facade, I would have laughed in disbelief. Ethan and I were the envy of our friends. Lavish vacations, spontaneous date nights, and that kind of understanding you think only exists in novels. Our home was a testament to our love, filled with photos of our adventures and laughter that echoed through the halls. It was perfect until it wasn't. Lately, Ethan's been pulling vanishing acts worthy of a magician. At first it was a missed dinner here and there, then it evolved into full nights where his side of the bed lay cold and untouched. "Just caught up with work," he'd say, flashing that smile that used to make me forget my name, let alone my worries. But that smile started to lose its magic. Curiosity turned into concern the night I stumbled upon a secret that was never meant for my eyes. Hidden away in the depths of Ethan's study beneath a stack of seemingly innocuous papers was a phone. Not just any phone, but one that buzzed with secrets. Secrets named Project X. My heart raced as I scrolled through messages from names I didn't recognize, discussing plans and meetings that Ethan had never mentioned. It felt like holding a grenade, unsure if pulling the pin would blow up my world. Confrontation was inevitable. "Project X? Really, Ethan? What's next? A secret agent reveal?" My attempt at humor fell flat as I held up the phone. He barely flinched, dismissing it as a surprise for our upcoming anniversary. "You're ruining the surprise," he chided, his laughter not reaching his eyes. I wanted to believe him, to go back to our perfect little bubble, but doubt had already set roots. Then came the day that turned my doubt into despair. Our bank called, our accounts were empty, drained overnight with a precision that left nothing but a gaping hole where our financial security used to be. Ethan's reaction was a cocktail of anger and confusion, a performance worthy of an award. But was it just that, a performance? The ground beneath me shifted, and I was left grappling with the fragments of the life I thought I knew. Ethan's mysterious absences, the secret phone, and now our vanished fortune. It was a puzzle whose pieces didn't want to fit. The man I loved, the man I trusted with everything, was he really the architect of my downfall? In the silence of our now echoless home, I realized that our perfect marriage was nothing but a carefully constructed lie, one that I was determined to unravel. But where do you start when every truth you held dear turns out to be the biggest lie of all? The morning Ethan disappeared, the sun blazed like it knew something I didn't. Our bed was empty, his side untouched. I laughed at first, thinking maybe he'd planned another of his surprise breakfasts. But the kitchen was cold. The silence a heavy blanket. That's when I felt it. A twist in my gut telling me something was terribly wrong. I called his phone, only to find it ringing in his study, buried under a pile of papers marked urgent. That's when I saw the drawers ajar, documents missing, and our safe wide open empty. Panic wasn't the word, it was more like being plunged into icy water, every breath a shock. As the hours ticked by with no sign of Ethan, I started to piece together the puzzle he'd left behind. Bank statements with huge withdrawals I knew nothing about, receipts for luxury items that never made their way home, and, most damning of all, photographs of him with a woman and child I'd never seen before. My heart didn't break, it froze, realizing the man I'd shared my bed with was a stranger. I couldn't sit and drown in betrayal. Fury bubbled up, replacing shock. Ethan had pulled the rug out from under me, but I'd be damned if I let him get away with it. I vowed to peel back every layer of his deceit, to reclaim what was mine and make him regret the day he thought he could make a fool of Ava Sinclair. The first call I made was to Marcus, Ethan's business partner turned rival. Our conversation was terse, charged with mutual disdain for the man who deceived us both. "I want in," I said, no room for argument in my voice. Marcus, ever the opportunist, recognized a shared goal when he saw one. "We start tomorrow," he agreed, and I could almost hear the gears turning in his mind. Tracking Ethan was like chasing a ghost. He'd covered his tracks with the skill of a master illusionist, but desperation and betrayal are potent motivators. We followed the breadcrumbs, from offshore accounts to shell companies, each discovery revealing the vast scope of Ethan's treachery. He wasn't just living a double life, he was living multiple, each more lavish and illicit than the last. Our alliance was uneasy, fueled by a shared desire for retribution rather than trust. Marcus had his reasons and I had mine, but our goal was singular: bring Ethan to his knees. The hunt took us across borders, through the murky waters of international finance, and into the heart of darkness Ethan had woven around himself. With every step, every uncovered lie, my resolve hardened. Ethan had taken everything from me, my love, my trust, my future, but he couldn't take my will to fight back. This was more than a quest for revenge. It was a battle for my very soul. And I was determined to win, no matter the cost. In the dead of night, in a city that felt as if it was holding its breath, I found myself crouched behind the shadowy contours of an unremarkable van, heart pounding in my ears. The street was deserted save for the occasional stray cat slinking through the underbrush, mirroring the stealth required for my current undertaking. I was miles away from home in a foreign land chasing shadows, or more precisely chasing Ethan, my husband, who had turned my life into a high-stakes game of cat and mouse. The tip had come from an unexpected source, a voice distorted beyond recognition, promising me the location where Ethan was supposed to show up. After months of dead ends and false leads, desperation had me grasping at this straw like it was a lifeline. I wasn't alone in my quest. Beside me was Marcus, Ethan's former business partner, whose betrayal had left a bitter taste. Yet here he was, an unlikely ally in my quest for justice, or was it revenge? The lines had blurred long ago. "We need to be quick," Marcus whispered, his eyes scanning the dimly lit facade of the warehouse before us. "He won't stay long," I nodded, the weight of my camera heavy against my chest. This wasn't just about confrontation. I needed proof of Ethan's duplicity, evidence of his double life that had shattered mine. The digital breadcrumbs he'd left behind painted a picture of a man I no longer recognized, entangled in illicit dealings and a second family that mocked the sanctity of our marriage. The waiting was excruciating. Each second stretched into eternity, filled with the echoes of my racing heart and the distant, haunting calls of the night. Then a figure emerged from the shadows, moving with a purpose that sent a shiver down my spine. It was him, Ethan. As we prepared to confront him, Marcus suddenly tensed, his hand gripping my arm with a force that stopped me in my tracks. "Wait," he hissed, a note of urgency in his voice that I hadn't heard before. Before I could question him, the night erupted into chaos. Figures emerged from the darkness, their sudden appearance startling me. It was an ambush, but not for Ethan, for us. Marcus had betrayed me, his allegiance to Ethan stronger than any grievance he'd harbored. The realization was a physical blow, leaving me reeling as they disappeared into the night, leaving me to face the consequences alone. The fallout was immediate and devastating. The public confrontation that followed, fueled by Ethan's manipulation of the narrative, painted me as the villain in our sordid tale. My reputation, already hanging by a thread, was torn to shreds, leaving me isolated and discredited. In the depths of my despair, a lifeline appeared. A mysterious benefactor, their identity shrouded in secrecy, reached out with information that promised to turn the tide. Ethan was more than just a cheating spouse. He was a linchpin in a criminal network whose tendrils stretched further than I could have imagined. As I pieced together the puzzle, the scope of Ethan's treachery became clear. He wasn't just running from me. He was a cog in a machine that operated in the shadows, dealing in secrets and lies that could topple empires. My personal vendetta had unwittingly drawn me into a battlefield that spanned continents, where trust was a currency no one could afford. The revelation was a cold comfort. My quest for revenge had exposed a conspiracy, but at what cost? My heart, once filled with love for the man I thought I knew, now harbored only the ashes of that illusion, a reminder of the perilous journey revenge had taken me on. The moment I had to ditch my life and dive into the shadows wasn't exactly what I'd call a highlight. There I was, Ava, hunched in the back seat of a battered sedan, clutching a burner phone and a fake ID like they were lifelines. My heart was pounding, not just from fear but from a deep, simmering rage. Ethan, my once beloved husband, had turned my world into a high-stakes thriller, and not the fun kind. Hiding out in a dingy motel room, I was plotting my next move when the phone buzzed. An unknown number flashed on the screen, sending a shiver down my spine. "Ava." The voice was familiar, yet hauntingly so. "It's time we met. I can help you." The caller? None other than Ethan's first wife, Laura, a woman I'd been led to believe was dead. Turns out she was very much alive and, like me, hungry for revenge. Over cups of stale coffee in a nondescript diner, Laura laid out the groundwork. Ethan was planning to flaunt his latest conquests at a high-profile gala, a perfect opportunity for us to strike. Infiltrating the gala was like stepping into another world. Dressed to kill, or at least seriously maim, I navigated through the sea of glittering gowns and tuxedos, every sense on high alert. Lara, ever the ghost, had disappeared into the crowd, leaving me to lock eyes with Ethan from across the room. The shock on his face was priceless, a moment of sweet satisfaction before the storm. I took the stage, the evidence of Ethan's misdeeds heavy in my hands. As I exposed his criminal empire, the room erupted into chaos. Allies turned on him, whispers growing into shouts. But Ethan wasn't going down without a fight. With a cruel smirk, he unleashed his counterattack, presenting falsified documents that painted me as the mastermind behind his crimes. The fallout was immediate and devastating. My reputation, already hanging by a thread, was shredded to pieces. Ethan's ability to twist the truth knew no bounds, leaving me to face the consequences of crimes I didn't commit. The public showdown had been my play, but Ethan had turned it into his stage, leaving me as the villain in the eyes of the world. As I fled the gala, the bitter taste of betrayal lingered. I'd come so close to taking Ethan down, only to have him slip through my fingers once more. But the fight wasn't over, not by a long shot. Lara and I, united in our cause, vanished into the night. Forced into hiding, we knew the battle ahead would be our toughest yet. Ethan had made his move, but the game was far from over. The clang of handcuffs closing around my wrists echoed like a death knell, a sound I never imagined would be part of my reality. "Ava Smith, you are under arrest," the officer had said, his face impassive as he read my rights. The drive to the station was a blur, every turn and stop a jolt towards a future I couldn't escape. Ethan had played his hand masterfully, painting me as the villain in a twisted tale I was still struggling to understand. The trial was a spectacle, a circus where I was both the main attraction and the most reviled performer. Ethan sat in the courtroom every day, a smug smile playing on his lips, as if he were watching his favorite play unfold. His confidence was maddening, his presence a constant reminder of the web of lies he'd woven so expertly around me. As witnesses paraded in and out, offering testimony that seemed to seal my fate tighter with each word, a glimmer of hope appeared. An unexpected witness came forward, presenting evidence that cast doubt on Ethan's narrative. For a moment, the courtroom buzzed with whispers, the scales of justice seemingly wavering. But it wasn't enough. The evidence discredited Ethan, yes, but it didn't clear my name. The damage was done, and the truth was buried under a mountain of lies too high for any to see beyond. The final betrayal came in the form of a friend, someone I'd trusted implicitly, someone who'd stood by my side through thick and thin, or so I thought. When they took the stand, their testimony was the knife that cut the deepest. Ava knew what she was doing. She planned everything, they said, their voice steady, eyes avoiding mine. Ethan had manipulated them, twisted their perception until they saw me as the enemy. The realization was a cold, hard punch to the gut, the loss of their support a wound that wouldn't heal. The public, once sympathetic to my plight, turned against me with a ferocity that was breathtaking. Social media became a battleground, with every post and comment a bullet aimed at my character. Friends, acquaintances, even strangers called for my head, swayed by the narrative Ethan had crafted. I was isolated, cut off from any semblance of support, a pariah in the very world I used to call home. In the end, Ethan's victory was absolute. The jury's decision came down like a hammer, sentencing me to a fate worse than I could have imagined. Legal consequences were just the beginning. The real sentence was the loss of my life as I knew it. Ethan walked away free, his fortune intact and his reputation somehow unblemished, while I was left to navigate the ruins of mine. Sitting in my cell, the weight of my situation pressed down on me with a force I couldn't describe. Ethan had won, not just the trial but the war, leaving me to serve the sentence for a crime I didn't commit. The battle had been long, the stakes high, but in the end, it was Ethan who had the last laugh. The game was over and I was left alone to ponder the cost of a war where justice was the ultimate casualty. The walls of my cell are cold, unyielding, a stark reminder of how far I've fallen. From a life filled with love and luxury to this barren existence. I'm Ava, and my once unbreakable resolve has begun to crumble piece by piece under the weight of my reality. The irony? I was fighting a battle that was rigged from the start. My days blend into one long, monotonous nightmare. The brief moments I'm allowed outside, I can't even feel the sun anymore. It's like I'm fading away, becoming a ghost in my own life. I keep replaying everything in my mind, wondering where it all went wrong. Was it the moment I swore revenge? Or perhaps when I discovered Ethan's betrayal? No, it was when I let vengeance consume me. Then the news comes, shattering the numbness that's been my shield. A guard, indifferent and cold, delivers the blow. Someone you knew. They're gone. Got too close to the flames you were playing with. My heart plummets. It's Lisa, my childhood friend, my confidant. She was collateral damage in this war I waged. The ultimate sacrifice, not by her choice, but mine. Guilt washes over me, a relentless tide that refuses to recede. As if orchestrated by fate, Ethan visits. He stands on the other side of the glass, a smug smile playing on his lips. Ava, 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 he tuts, his voice dripping with false pity. You played right into my hands. Did you really think you could win against me? His words are like daggers, each one meticulously aimed to wound. He reveals it all, the manipulation, the traps, and how he'd been plotting my downfall since the moment I dared to defy him. This wasn't just revenge, it was annihilation. Sitting there, listening to Ethan's taunts, something within me shifts. A painful clarity settles in, slicing through the fog of my hatred and despair. My quest for revenge, my single-minded pursuit of justice, it was all for naught. I'd become a pawn in Ethan's game, dancing to his tune, and in doing so, I'd lost myself. Worse, I'd hurt those I loved, those who were innocent. The visit ends, but Ethan's words linger, echoing in the empty chasm of my soul. Reflection comes unbidden, harsh and unrelenting. I see now the cycle of destruction I helped perpetuate, a cycle fueled by vengeance and hatred. It dawns on me that this path never offered redemption. It only led to more pain, more loss. In the quiet of my cell, with the weight of my actions crushing me, I realized the futility of my revenge. It didn't bring peace or closure, only more sorrow. The cost was too high, the losses too profound. Ethan may have orchestrated my downfall, but I walked the path willingly, blinded by my rage. This journey, once fueled by a desire to right the wrongs done to me, has taught me a bitter lesson. Revenge is a poison, one that corrupts and destroys everything it touches. I thought I was seeking justice, but all I found was my own ruin. Now, all that's left is the hope for redemption, not from the world or even Ethan, but from myself. To somehow make amends for the pain I've caused, to honor the memory of those who paid the price for my vendetta. It's a faint hope, a mere glimmer in the darkness that surrounds me. But sometimes, it's the smallest light that can guide you out of the deepest darkness. Just when I thought my story had reached its bleak finale, fate or perhaps sheer dumb luck tossed me a lifeline. Huddled in the dim light of my cell, a guard slipped me a piece of evidence that could potentially flip the script on my nightmare. It was a long shot, the kind that you'd bet against in any sensible scenario. But my life had stopped making sense the moment Ethan decided to make me his enemy. With nothing left to lose, I pored over the details of this newfound glimmer of hope. It was a series of financial transactions traced back to Ethan, the kind that reeked of his arrogance. They were sloppy, hurried, a rare crack in his otherwise impenetrable facade. This wasn't just a lead. It was a beacon in the darkness that had become my existence. The decision to chase this sliver of hope was risky, borderline insane. I'd be exposing myself, reaching out from the shadows where I'd found a semblance of safety. But the fire Ethan had ignited in me, the one I thought had been extinguished by defeat and despair, flickered to life once more. I reached out to what few allies I had left, those not yet scared off by Ethan's wrath or my tarnished reputation. Together, we began to weave a plan, a last stand against the man who'd taken everything from us. This plan wasn't just about vengeance, it was about justice, about exposing the rot at the core of Ethan's empire. From my cell, I directed our moves like a general from behind the lines, using every scrap of knowledge and cunning I'd acquired in our twisted game of cat and mouse. The pieces began to move, each play more daring than the last, setting off a chain reaction that even Ethan couldn't predict. As the plan unfolded, cracks appeared in Ethan's once unassailable fortress. Other victims of his schemes, emboldened by our audacity, came forward with their own pieces of the puzzle. Together we painted a picture of corruption, greed, and betrayal that no amount of his manipulation could distort. The tide was turning, And for the first time since this nightmare began, I dared to feel a spark of hope. Then, the dominoes began to fall. Ethan's empire, a towering structure of lies and deceit, crumbled under the weight of truth. Assets were frozen, cronies arrested, and the labyrinth of his criminal network began to unravel. The man who had seemed untouchable, who had orchestrated my downfall with such cold precision, was finally reaping the whirlwind he'd sown. In a desperate bid to escape the collapsing world he'd built, Ethan attempted to flee the country, but there was no evading the consequences of his actions. The law, slow and sometimes blind, finally caught up with him. News of his arrest was a sweet, albeit bitter, victory. From the depths of my cell, I savored the moment, not with joy, but with a solemn recognition of the cost. Ethan's desperation in his final moments of freedom was a mirror to the desperation he'd forced upon me. But as I sat there, surrounded by the cold, unyielding walls of my prison, I realized that this wasn't just about Ethan or me. It was about every life he'd touched, every person he'd used and discarded in his relentless pursuit of power. The collapse of Ethan's empire was more than the end of his reign of terror. It was a testament to the resilience of those he'd underestimated. We, the supposed pawns in his grand game, had shown that even the mightiest tyrant could fall. And while I remained behind bars, the knowledge that Ethan would finally face justice for his crimes brought a sense of closure, however small. As I lay back on my bunk, the dim light casting long shadows across the cell, I allowed myself a moment to dream of freedom. Not just from the physical confines of my imprisonment, but from the chains Ethan had bound around my heart and soul. The battle was over, but the war for my redemption was just beginning. The clang of prison bars closing has become the soundtrack to my life. Here, in this concrete box, time both stands still and races forward, marking the days of my existence in a place I never imagined I'd call home. My name's Ava, and while the man who turned my life into a living nightmare faces justice, I'm entangled in a web of my own, with freedom an elusive dream just out of reach. The irony of it all? I was offered a way out, a deal dangled before me like a carrot before a starving horse. They said all I had to do was play their game, bend my morals, and betray the very essence of who I am. But how could I? Accepting that deal would mean conceding defeat to Ethan, letting him win in a way that mattered most. So I turned it down, choosing the moral high ground over an easy escape. It's a decision that haunts me with every breath I take in this cold, unforgiving place. Yet in the heart of despair, I found something unexpected. A purpose. Surrounded by women each carrying their own stories of sorrow and regret, I became a beacon of hope, a shoulder to lean on and a guide. Teaching, counseling, simply being there. It's not the life I envisioned, but it's one that gives me a reason to wake up each morning. Through helping them, I've started to piece together the fragments of my own shattered spirit. Meanwhile, the world outside moved on. Ethan's trial became the spectacle of the century, a drama I could only experience through whispers and second-hand recounts. The day the verdict came, guilty, I felt a hollow victory. His sentence, though lengthy, seemed a mere slap on the wrist compared to the wreckage he'd left in his wake. It was justice, but not the kind I'd hoped for, not the kind that would repair the lives he'd destroyed, mine included. Resignation is a bitter pill to swallow. I've come to accept that my old life, the one filled with love, laughter, and dreams of the future, is gone, vanished like smoke in the wind. The realization doesn't come easy, and it doesn't come without its fair share of tears and sleepless nights. But within the confines of this prison, I found a semblance of peace, a way to live with the cards I've been dealt. Then came Ethan's final taunt, a letter delivered to my cell, his words meant to cut deep one last time. But I refused to give him the satisfaction. That letter remained unopened, a testament to my resolve, to the strength I've found in the darkest of places. My story, as it turns out, became a cautionary tale, a warning of the dangers of unchecked ambition and the destructive path of revenge. It's a narrative that's taken on a life of its own beyond these walls, inspiring others to stand up against the injustices of the world. Knowing that my ordeal might prevent someone else from falling into the same abyss brings a small comfort, a tiny flicker of pride amidst the ruins of my life. The future is a murky path, shrouded in uncertainty. There's talk of appeals, of new evidence, whispers of freedom on the horizon. Yet I've learned not to cling too tightly to hope. to understand that the world I'm stepping back into is not the one I left behind. As I stand by the window of my cell, gazing out at the sliver of sky carved out by concrete and barbed wire, I'm struck by the profound cost of my journey. There's no redemption waiting for me, no triumphant return to a life of normalcy. But perhaps in the end, it's not about the destination, but the lessons learned along the way. The story closes with me, Ava, a woman forever changed by betrayal and the quest for justice, contemplating the complexities of human nature and the indomitable spirit of those who seek to right the wrongs of the world. In the silence of my cell, I'm left with my thoughts, my regrets, and the faintest whisper of hope that maybe, just maybe,